picture the scenario because I think it is a completely universal experience for anyone trying to navigate a demanding life right now.
Welcome to FM Talks, by the way. I'm so glad you're joining us today as we explore a better way to live.
Yes, exactly. So picture this. It's exactly 3 p.m. on a typical Tuesday.
Right. The danger zone.
The absolute danger zone.
Yeah.
So you were completely on fire all morning.
Yeah.
You crushed a major presentation. You navigated a delicate situation with a client.
Feeling good.
You feel incredibly capable. You even cleared out your inbox on your lunch break. And then, quite suddenly, this invisible switch flips.
Yeah.
Your eyelids suddenly weigh 1,000 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
A thick, just unyielding fog rolls into your brain.
Wow.
You find yourself staring at your laptop screen, reading the exact same sentence in an email 5 times in a row.
And none of it is registering.
Absolutely none of it.
Ugh.
Every single fiber of your being just wants to crawl under your desk and take a nap. Or, more likely, you're desperately scanning the room for some kind of sugary treat just to survive until 5.
Yeah.
It is a terrible feeling, and honestly, it feels like a personal failure every time it happens.
It really does. And that 3 p.m. wall you just described is so universally felt and yet so completely misunderstood.
Oh, totally.
I was reading through this incredible manuscript recently, simply referred to as The Guide, and it contains this discovery that completely changes how we view this exact moment in our day.
Okay, I love a fundamental shift in perspective.
It really is. The core thesis that the guide presents is profoundly liberating. That 3 p.m. crash you experience is not a personal failure.
Thank goodness.
It is not a character flaw. It is definitely not a sign of getting older or lacking discipline. It is purely and simply a biological signal.
A biological signal.
Yep.
I mean, on paper, that sounds very clinical and straightforward, but in the reality of a woman's messy daily life, we absolutely do not treat it like a biological signal.
Right, you do.
We treat it like a profound character flaw. The internal monologue is brutal. You just sit there at your desk and think, if I were just a stronger person, if I had my life together better, I wouldn't be fading right now. We completely personalize the exhaustion.
And that internalization of fatigue is exactly what the guide addresses right out of the gate.
Yeah.
We've been conditioned to view our bodies as machines that should just perform flawlessly on command.
Just push a button and go.
Exactly. But our biology is entirely different. The guide offers this brilliant, really clarifying analogy that cuts right through that guilt.
Okay.
Imagine you're driving your car down the highway.
Okay.
You're making great time, music is playing, and suddenly a little light on your dashboard starts blinking red. The oil light.
Right.
When that happens, you certainly don't start yelling at your car. You don't grip the steering wheel and call your car lazy.
Or undisciplined.
Right. You don't put black tape over the light and just hope it magically resolves itself.
Yeah, you pull over.
You immediately recognize the light itself isn't the problem. The light is just helpful, neutral communication. It's telling you the engine requires a specific input to keep running.
Okay, I see where this is going.
That afternoon slump is nothing more than your body's blinking oil light. It's a dashboard indicator flashing on the console of your nervous system.
The dashboard analogy is incredibly helpful, but let's translate that to a busy Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah.
If my body is just flashing an oil light, the immediate takeaway is that I need to stop the guilt spiral.
Yes. Right in that
It
moment.
means we have to start trying to white-knuckle our way through the afternoon, pretending we aren't exhausted, because trying to fight your own biology with sheer mental force is not a badge of honor.
It's a fast track to burnout.
Exactly. But I have to push back a little here.
Okay.
When you are on a tight deadline, or your kids are getting out of school in an hour, and you still have 3 major tasks to finish,
Yeah.
a biological signal just feels like an incredibly inconvenient obstacle. We can't just pull the car over and stop driving.
No, you can't.
So how do we actually handle the blinking light when we are forced to stay on the highway?
So the first step to handling it without pulling over is understanding the underlying mechanics of what that light is actually indicating.
Okay.
We have to look closely at the physiology of that exact moment. The guide calls this sensation the heavy eye wall.
Heavy eye wall.
Yes, it's that undeniable physical barrier you hit where your body literally feels weighted down in your chair.
Like the chair's magnetic.
Exactly. And your brain feels like it's moving through wet concrete. What's happening internally is this fascinating cascade of biological events.
Okay.
Your brain, which acts as the mission control for your entire physical form, is a highly energy-intensive organ. It only accounts for about 2% of your body weight.
But it uses a ton of energy.
Right, roughly 20% of your body's energy. And it runs almost exclusively on glucose.
Got it.
When the brain senses a sudden steep drop in that available fuel, it doesn't just quietly put in a requisition form for more energy. It enters a primal biological panic mode.
A primal panic mode. That certainly explains the sheer intensity of the craving. It never feels like a gentle suggestion to maybe have a light snack.
No.
It feels like an absolute 5-alarm emergency.
That's because, from an evolutionary standpoint, a sudden drop in glucose is a survival threat. When this happens, a profound shift occurs in how your brain operates.
What kind of shift?
So the prefrontal cortex.
The logical part.
Yes, the part responsible for long-term planning, executive function, rational decision-making, that part starts to power down to conserve energy.
Oh, wow.
And simultaneously, the amygdala, which governs your primal survival instincts, takes the wheel.
So we are literally not in our right minds.
Exactly. In this state, your brain completely stops caring about your long-term health goals. It does not care about the strategic report you need to finish.
And it definitely doesn't care about the promises you made yourself that morning about eating healthy.
Not at all. It prioritizes one single objective: acquiring fast burn, emergency fuel to stabilize the system.
Okay.
And the fastest, most efficient burning fuel available is refined sugar.
That shift from the rational brain to the survival brain perfectly illustrates why the internal negotiation we do is so utterly exhausting.
It's draining.
Think about the reality of sitting at your desk when that panic mode hits. The guilt spiral isn't just about the moment you eventually eat a cookie or a handful of candy.
Right.
It's the agonizing 20-minute battle that precedes it. You sit there telling yourself, I shouldn't do this, I'm going to be strong today, I don't need the sugar.
Yeah.
You are asking your prefrontal cortex, which is already depleted of fuel, to fight off a survival instinct from the amygdala.
It's a war of attrition.
Exactly. You inevitably surrender because the physical pull is simply too strong. And then the wave of shame washes over you afterward. That entire cycle, the resistance, the surrender, the shame, it drains whatever tiny reserve of energy you had left for the afternoon.
And that draining cycle is exactly what the guide calls the willpower trap. Attempting to fight a deeply ingrained biological survival signal with conscious mental discipline is a fundamentally flawed strategy.
Because you can't win.
It's like trying to hold your breath indefinitely. You might be able to use willpower to hold your breath for a minute, maybe two, if you're incredibly disciplined.
But eventually, biology always wins.
It has to win, because your brain's primary job is to keep you alive. When you try to use willpower to solve a biological fuel shortage, you are bringing the completely wrong tool to the job. You cannot outthink a physiological deficit.
I hear that. But let's look at a really realistic scenario here, because I can easily imagine someone listening right now saying, okay, that makes sense if I ate a box of donuts for breakfast.
Sure.
But what if I wasn't eating junk? What if I ate a really sensible lunch?
Define sensible.
Okay, let's say a busy woman grabs a standard, normal lunch between meetings. A turkey sandwich on soft white bread, maybe a small handful of pretzels, and a diet drink.
Okay.
That sounds like a perfectly reasonable choice. It's not decadent. Why is she still hitting that heavy eye wall and hearing that panic voice demanding sugar at 2:30? She didn't do anything inherently wrong.
The mechanics of our digestion provide the answer here, and they're incredibly illuminating. That sensible lunch you just described is actually the perfect architectural setup for what the guide identifies as the sugar roller coaster.
The sugar roller coaster. Okay, explain that.
Here's the biological logic behind it. When you consume foods that are high in refined carbohydrates, like the soft white bread on that turkey sandwich, or the pretzels, your digestive system breaks them down into simple sugars almost instantaneously.
Right.
The process actually begins in your mouth with enzymes in your saliva, because those refined foods lack meaningful amounts of dietary fiber, healthy fats, or sufficient protein to slow down the absorption process. That broken down sugar floods into your bloodstream all at once.
It all hits at once.
Your blood sugar levels shoot straight up, mimicking the steep, terrifying vertical climb of a roller coaster car.
And for a minute, that probably feels pretty good, right? You get that initial rush of energy right after you eat.
You do. For a brief window, maybe 30 to 45 minutes, you feel a significant rush of energy. You feel alert and productive.
Okay.
But your body is an incredibly sophisticated environment. And it strictly regulates blood sugar because chronically high glucose is toxic to your blood vessels.
So it panics.
It senses this massive, dangerous spike and hits an internal panic button of its own. The pancreas responds by releasing a massive flood of a hormone called insulin.
Right.
Insulin's job is to act like a key, unlocking your cells to grab all that circulating sugar out of your blood and store it away safely.
So the body sees a massive spike and sends out a massive response to clean it up. Let me guess, it completely overcompensates.
It overcorrects dramatically. Because the initial spike was so unnaturally rapid, the insulin response is equally aggressive. It pulls too much sugar out of your bloodstream far too quickly.
Oh, wow.
And that is the exact moment the roller coaster car plummets over the edge of the track. That sudden steep plunge in your blood glucose levels is the direct physiological cause of that 2:30 shaky, desperate feeling.
That's the crash.
That is the crash. Your brain goes from having an artificial overabundance of fuel to suddenly running on fumes, which immediately triggers the primal panic mode and the demand for more fast-burn sugar. You are locked in a physiological loop.
Translating this roller coaster effect to a woman's actual afternoon changes everything about how we view our own behavior.
How so?
Imagine sitting at your desk at 2:30. Your hands feel a little shaky, your mind is wandering, you feel absolutely desperate for a candy bar from the break room,
Yeah.
and you are quietly berating yourself for having zero self-control. But the reality is, you aren't weak at all. Your body is just experiencing the inevitable plunge from the roller coaster ticket you inadvertently punched at 12:30.
Exactly.
You didn't fail a moral test of character. You simply ate a lunch that created a massive biological spike and a mathematically guaranteed crash.
Right.
Understanding this mechanism is so deeply freeing because it finally separates your moral worth from your physical energy levels. It removes the character judgment entirely.
And the removal of that moral judgment is a crucial step in building a better daily flow. It's vital to realize that avoiding this roller coaster isn't always intuitive.
No, it's not.
We frequently fall into this trap because of what the guide calls the sneaky saboteurs. The modern food industry is exceptionally skilled at health-washing products.
Oh, they are so good at it.
You might be at a coffee shop, rushing to a meeting, and you reach for a beautifully packaged granola bar. It has a pristine, snow-capped mountain on the wrapper. Words like natural energy and wholesome.
Or a perfectly blended yogurt smoothie that looks vibrant and healthy.
Yes, you genuinely believe you're making a responsible choice to fuel your afternoon. But if you analyze the macronutrients, many of these snacks lack any meaningful protein, healthy fats, or fiber.
They're just sugar.
They're entirely carbohydrate heavy. They're just sugar imposters in a clever disguise. They trigger the exact same rapid biological spike and crash as a traditional candy bar.
But they carry a halo of health.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which leaves you completely bewildered and frustrated when you inevitably crash an hour later.
That is so true, and it's incredibly maddening. We try so hard to make the right choices. We spend the extra money on the healthy smoothie, and it feels like a betrayal when that snack, which promised sustained energy, it just leaves us jittery and exhausted.
Yeah.
It feels like you just can't win. But let's push this scenario even further because I know there are listeners who are very meticulous about their food.
Okay.
What if someone ate perfectly? Let's say I had a beautiful, massive salad with grilled chicken for protein, plenty of healthy fats from half an avocado, loads of fiber from mixed greens and seeds,
A great choice.
and absolutely zero refined sugar or simple carbohydrates. I completely avoided the roller coaster.
Right.
Yet right around 2 p.m., I'm still feeling this undeniable heavy pull toward rest. My eyelids still feel heavy, and I still want to put my head down. What is happening then if we can definitively rule out a blood sugar crash?
If you have entirely stepped off the sugar roller coaster and you're still feeling a pronounced dip in energy, you're likely experiencing the profound pull of your body's natural, ancient rhythms.
Ancient ribs.
Yeah. The guide explains that there are two powerful biological forces at play in this scenario, and neither of them are related to blood sugar.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first force is called the daily rhythm dip. Every single human being operates on an internal circadian clock, guided by a cluster of nerves in the brain.
Right, the circadian rhythm.
Exactly. About 7 to 8 hours after you wake up, regardless of what you have eaten, your body naturally initiates a slight programmed drop in your core body temperature.
Interesting.
Simultaneously, there is a tiny corresponding spike in sleep-inducing hormones like melatonin and adenosine. This is a built-in biological signal that evolved over millions of years to prompt our ancestors to rest, seek shelter, and conserve energy during the intense heat of the midday sun.
So this afternoon lull is quite literally programmed into our DNA. It's a feature of being human, not a bug in our individual operating software.
It is a fundamental feature of human biology. And the second force compounding this feeling is what the guide terms the post-lunch radiator.
The post-lunch radiator, I love that imagery.
Whenever you consume a meal, even a perfectly balanced, nutrient-dense one, your body has to perform a significant amount of metabolic work to digest and assimilate those nutrients.
Right.
To accomplish this, the parasympathetic nervous system, often called the rest and digest system, takes over. It actively diverts a substantial volume of blood flow away from your extremities and your brain, sending it down to your gastrointestinal tract.
So the blood is literally leaving our heads.
Yes. This internal work generates a slight amount of thermal heat, hence the term radiator, and leaves your brain with slightly less oxygen and blood flow than it had an hour prior.
Makes total sense.
The combined result of the core temperature drop and the blood flow diversion is a feeling of warm, heavy, comfortable sluggishness.
I appreciate that perspective so much because it entirely reframes the experience. Think of your workday like a long, challenging hike through varying terrain. You start out strong and fast in the cool morning air. But when you hit a steep, sun-drenched hill in the early afternoon, you don't try to sprint up it at the same pace. And you certainly don't get furious with yourself for breathing heavily or needing to slow down.
You adjust.
You adjust. You honor the terrain. When that post-lunch radiator warmth hits and that daily rhythm dip sets in, we don't need to panic, and we don't need to feel guilty that we aren't performing at our 9 a.m. peak.
Yeah.
We just need to recognize that we have hit a natural biological incline in our day. In a practical sense, honoring the terrain for a busy professional might mean intentionally setting up your daily flow so that your high-focus, strategic thinking happens in the morning.
Exactly.
And you save your administrative tasks, your casual catch-ups, or your inbox clearing for that 2 p.m. window. You adjust your pace rather than forcing a sprint.
Honoring the terrain by adjusting cognitive load is a highly effective rhythm to build into your life. But part of successfully navigating that terrain is learning to accurately distinguish between different types of fatigue.
What do you mean?
Because sometimes the terrain isn't naturally steep. Sometimes the environment is just incredibly dry, or your mental resources are simply depleted. The guide draws a sharp, vital contrast between two very different experiences that we often confuse:
Okay, what are they?
the dry brain fog and the dopamine surge. Let's look at the dry brain fog first.
Okay.
This is a purely physiological state. The human brain is composed of roughly 73% water. Even a tiny, almost imperceptible 1 to 2% drop in your body's overall hydration levels can cause a significant, measurable decrease in cognitive function.
Just 1 or 2%.
Just 1 to 2%. The brain tissue literally loses volume. This manifests as a dull, throbbing headache, a feeling of mental static, difficulty recalling words, and a profound inability to focus.
Wow.
It is literally like looking at a houseplant that hasn't been watered for a week.
Yeah.
The cellular pressure drops and the leaves just visibly droop and wilt.
The wilting houseplant is such a visceral image. It is exactly what that static-filled headache feels like. Yeah. But here is the challenge for a modern woman. How do we tell the difference in the heat of a chaotic day? Let's say you just finished a grueling 90-minute Zoom presentation with cross-functional teams.
Exhausting.
You had to field a dozen rapid-fire difficult questions. You put out 3 separate interpersonal fires, and you finally close your laptop feeling completely drained.
Right.
Instantly, you find yourself standing up and wandering into the kitchen, opening the pantry, and looking for a bag of chocolate chips or a salty snack. Is that the wilting houseplant needing water? Or is that something entirely different?
In that specific scenario of high cognitive stress, it is highly likely you're experiencing the second phenomenon, the dopamine surge.
A dopamine surge.
Yes. After a period of intense focus, emotional regulation, or high cognitive load, your brain's internal neurotransmitters are heavily depleted.
Yeah.
Your brain essentially acts like an internal human resources department, demanding a bonus for a job well done.
Wants a reward.
It wants a surge of dopamine, which is the neurotransmitter associated with reward and pleasure. And the fastest, most reliable, most heavily reinforced way to get a massive dopamine release in modern life is through a sweet, highly palatable, or salty treat.
That makes so much sense.
The crucial distinction here is that this is not a biological need for caloric fuel. It is a neurological demand for emotional and chemical relief.
This distinction is monumental for how we manage our days. Being able to pause on a busy afternoon and ask yourself one simple, clarifying question. Is my stomach actually growling because I am physically hungry? Or am I just incredibly stressed and my brain is looking for a quick mental high five?
Yeah, that pause is everything.
That tiny pause interrupts the autopilot sequence. If it is the wilting plant, you know you just need to drink a massive glass of water. But if you recognize it as the dopamine surge, you realize you don't actually need the chocolate chips. What you need is a moment of comfort, a tiny break from the stress, a change of scenery, or a chance to vent to a colleague. Recognizing the true source of the craving stops you from trying to fix a stressed, overwhelmed mind with sugar it doesn't biologically require.
The pause to diagnose the need is essential. Unfortunately, because we're moving so fast, we often misdiagnose these signals, which leads us to fall into common self-defeating behaviors.
Like what?
The first major behavioral mistake we make is relying on what the guide refers to as the caffeine band-aid.
Oh, guilty.
When we feel the onset of that dry brain fog, that headache, and loss of focus, our immediate culturally conditioned reflex is to reach for another cup of coffee or an energy drink.
Of course it is.
But caffeine works by blocking adenosine receptors in the brain. It essentially masks the feeling of fatigue without actually providing any physical energy. Furthermore, caffeine is a mild diuretic, meaning it prompts your kidneys to excrete more fluid.
Oh no, so it makes the drought worse.
Exactly. Trying to fix dehydration-induced brain fog with coffee is biologically equivalent to trying to water that wilting houseplant with dry sand.
Watering a plant with dry sand. That is terrifying.
It might give you a temporary jittery jolt by stimulating your adrenal glands, but it fundamentally deepens the underlying physiological drought. To make matters worse, the half-life of caffeine means that a 3 p.m. coffee lingers in your system well into the evening, disrupting your deep sleep architecture and ensuring you wake up already fatigued the next day.
It's the ultimate vicious cycle. We borrow energy from tomorrow just to survive the demands of today, and the interest rate on that borrowed energy is absolutely terrible. We wake up tired, so we drink more coffee, which dehydrates us more, causing more brain fog, leading to more coffee.
The cycle is incredibly taxing on the nervous system. The other major mistakes we make revolve around our physical posture and our environment. The guide identifies the movement myth, which is the deeply ingrained, logical-sounding belief that when you feel tired, you are physically too tired to move.
Yeah.
And therefore, you must sit perfectly still to conserve whatever energy you have left. Coupled with this is the water waiver, that little voice in your head that says, "I'm not thirsty, I'm just exhausted," leading you to ignore the water bottle sitting right on your desk.
I do that all the time.
But from a physiological standpoint, sitting absolutely still in a rigid office chair for hours actually slows your blood circulation to a crawl.
Yeah.
Your cardiovascular system isn't being stimulated to push fresh, oxygen-rich blood up to your brain effectively.
Wow.
By sitting still to conserve energy, you are literally starving your brain of the oxygen and blood flow it desperately needs to feel alert.
The irony of that is stunning. Sitting still to protect our energy is actually the very behavior causing the loss of energy. That is a massive paradigm shift.
Yeah.
In reality, the most effective rhythm you can build into your complicated afternoon is a simple 5-minute reset. And we aren't talking about needing to do a 45-minute high-intensity workout or change into gym clothes.
No, not at all.
You just need to break the sedentary traffic jam in your vascular system. Standing up, stretching your arms overhead to open up your lungs, walking to a window and looking at something far away to change your visual depth of field and rest your optic nerve, and slowly drinking a large glass of water.
Exactly.
That tiny, incredibly simple 5-minute sequence sends a rush of oxygen, hydration, and fresh blood to your brain that is far more effective and far more gentle on your nervous system than a double espresso. It resets your physical posture and clears the physiological fog instantly.
That 5-minute reset is a perfect practical example of shifting away from fighting your biology and moving toward working in harmony with it.
Absolutely.
But as we transition into the next major, highly detailed concept from the guide, we have to acknowledge a fundamental truth. The afternoon slump is not a monolithic universal experience.
Okay.
It's not a single one-size-fits-all problem, which means a generic one-size-fits-all solution will inevitably fail. To truly address your specific energy drain, you have to understand your unique behavioral patterns.
Your unique patterns.
Yes. You have to find your personal slump style. To help with this, the guide breaks down our afternoon behaviors into 4 distinct eater archetypes.
I am so glad we are getting into this because this is where the advice stops feeling generic and gets incredibly personal and revealing. It looks closely at how we actually construct our days and how our unique stressors dictate our behaviors.
Let's examine the first archetype in detail, the erratic eater.
Okay.
This archetype describes someone who is fundamentally time-crunched and operates in a perpetual state of urgency. They view food largely as an inconvenient afterthought.
I know a lot of people like this.
A typical day for the erratic eater might involve skipping breakfast entirely in a rush to get out the door, working straight through their lunch hour to clear their inbox, and running entirely on cortisol, adrenaline, and multiple cups of black coffee.
The classic corporate warrior mode.
Right. By the time 2:30 rolls around, their body hasn't just experienced a slight circadian dip. It has hit a desert-level metabolic drought.
Because they haven't eaten anything.
Exactly. The biological consequence of skipping meals is that their liver has depleted all its stored glycogen. Their blood sugar drops so low that their brain triggers a massive, overwhelming panic response.
They're starving.
They aren't just mildly hungry, they are ravenous, physically shaky, unfocused, and desperate. The crucial insight here is that the erratic eater does not need a better strategy for resisting break room snacks at 3 p.m.
Right.
They do not need more willpower. They need to focus entirely on fueling their body hours before the emergency ever occurs.
The erratic eater is so deeply relatable for anyone managing a chaotic schedule. If you are a woman managing a demanding career, running a busy household, or often both, it is so incredibly easy to put everyone else's immediate needs first.
It happens so fast.
You ensure the kids are fed and out the door. You answer the urgent, high-priority emails from your boss. You put out fires for your team. And suddenly you look at the clock and realize it's 2 p.m. and you haven't eaten a single substantial thing since a piece of toast at 7 a.m. When that deep, shaky panic hits, you are completely defenseless. You end up grabbing whatever's immediately in front of you. A stale pastry someone left in the break room, a bag of chips from the vending machine, or even the leftover crusts of your kid's sandwich.
Yep.
And then, predictably, you feel terrible about yourself for having no willpower. But identifying with this archetype removes that shame entirely. Your character wasn't flawed, your daily setup was flawed.
Precisely.
You simply need to build a non-negotiable rhythm where you consume a protein-heavy snack like a hard-boiled egg or a handful of almonds at 11:30 a.m., effectively stopping the biological emergency before it has a chance to start.
The intervention absolutely has to match the specific mechanism of the archetype. Now let's contrast the erratic pattern with the second archetype, the dopamine seeker.
The one searching for the reward.
We touched on the neurobiology of this earlier, but it deserves a deeper look. Yeah. This person uses food primarily as a tool for feeling, not as a source of physical fuel. They aren't experiencing a physical blood sugar crash from skipping meals. Their blood sugar might be perfectly stable. Instead, they are navigating a complex psychological landscape. They are craving a sweet, comforting, highly palatable reward after enduring a period of hard work, emotional stress, difficult conversations, or even just profound, repetitive boredom.
Oh, boredom eating is real.
Very real. Their brain is actively seeking a chemical lift to alter their mood. The key insight for the dopamine seeker is that trying to white-knuckle past the craving and deny the brain its reward is a miserable, unsustainable experience. They need to intentionally provide their brain with a non-food sensory reward that satisfies that specific neurological itch.
This is the archetype for anyone who has just survived a harrowing morning. Maybe you spent 3 hours managing toddlers who are throwing consecutive tantrums, or you just got off a deeply frustrating call with a highly unreasonable client. Or you spent the morning wrestling with a spreadsheet that refuses to format correctly. By the time the afternoon arrives, you don't want a handful of raw almonds or a piece of celery. You want a massive, decadent slice of cake or a heavy, sugary coffee drink because you feel deep in your bones like you have earned it.
You feel entitled to it.
And honestly, looking at the stress you endured, you did earn a reward. The reality check here is recognizing that while you deserve a reward, the cake is going to make you feel physically worse, sluggish, and guilty an hour later.
Right.
If you know you fall into the dopamine seeker archetype, your habit shift is finding something else that feels genuinely luxurious, comforting, and rewarding. Maybe it is keeping a really expensive, beautiful hand cream in your desk drawer.
I love that.
Or putting on noise-canceling headphones and listening to a specific playlist you love. Or literally stepping outside your building alone for 5 minutes of absolute uninterrupted silence. You have to give yourself the emotional high five without inviting the biological crash.
That intentional transition from a food-based reward to a sensory-based reward is incredibly powerful because it rewires the brain's habit loop over time. The third archetype the guide introduces is profoundly complex, the judgmental eater.
The judgmental eater.
This behavioral pattern is deeply rooted in perfectionism and anxiety. This person categorizes all food choices into strict, uncompromising moral terms. There are purely good foods and purely bad foods.
Right.
A judgmental eater might consume a perfectly clean, highly restrictive salad with no dressing for lunch, feeling a strong sense of virtue and control. But the psychological burden of that restriction is immense.
It's exhausting to maintain.
Very. The moment they have a single minor slip-up, let's say they eat one small cookie from a tray in the office, their fragile, rigid internal rules completely shatter.
The whole system breaks.
This triggers a psychological phenomena, often called counter-regulatory eating or the what-the-hell effect.
Yeah.
They think, well, I've completely ruined my perfect day now, which immediately leads to abandoning all restraint, resulting in a massive binge and a devastating, heavy guilt spiral.
Yeah.
The profound insight for the judgmental eater is that restriction is the true enemy, not the food itself. They need to shift their entire mental framework from restriction to the concept of addition.
Oh, the judgmental eater. This archetype is so deeply ingrained in how modern women are taught to view diet, health, and their own bodies. We are constantly conditioned by society to be perfect, to be small, to be flawlessly disciplined, and when we inevitably aren't, the self-flagellation is intense.
It's a heavy burden.
The sheer emotional and cognitive energy spent constantly policing your own food choices, measuring your worth by what you ate, is utterly exhausting. It is a full-time job in your head.
Exactly.
If you relate to this archetype, the concept of addition is a total game changer for how you experience your daily life. It means that if it's 3 p.m. and you really, truly want a chocolate chip cookie, you don't ban it. You don't tell yourself you are bad for wanting it. You allow it. But you add a handful of walnuts or almonds to it, or you eat it alongside a piece of cheese. The protein and fat from the nuts or cheese physically slow down the gastric emptying and stabilize your blood sugar, preventing the physical roller coaster crash.
That's the biology of it.
More importantly, the psychological permission to eat the cookie prevents the emotional crash. You take away the moral failing, you neutralize the threat, and suddenly food completely loses its power to ruin your entire day.
The biochemistry of addition completely neutralizes the physiological threat, and the psychology of permission neutralizes the emotional threat. It's a brilliant strategy. Finally, we must look at the fourth archetype, the decision fatigue snacker.
Okay, tell me about this one.
This person isn't necessarily restricting food, nor are they necessarily seeking deep emotional comfort from trauma. They are simply experiencing profound, cumulative mental exhaustion. The brain, as we discussed, is a biological organ, and the very act of making decisions, evaluating options, weighing consequences, exercising self-control requires actual metabolic energy.
It burns fuel.
This concept is known as ego depletion. By the late afternoon, after making hundreds of micro decisions, managing a team, directing projects, answering endless questions, the prefrontal cortex battery is quite literally at 1%.
Completely drained.
When the slump hits, they simply lack the cognitive resources required to plan, prepare, or even decide on a healthy nutritional option. In the face of complex choices, an exhausted brain defaults to the absolute path of least resistance.
Yes, the decision fatigue snacker is the lived reality for almost every busy adult trying to hold a life together. Think about the sheer volume of choices in a typical day. You decide what to wear. You decide how to carefully word a delicate email to a frustrated client.
Right.
You decide what to feed the family for dinner. You navigate traffic routes. You mediate a conflict between your kids or your coworkers. By 4 p.m., if someone asks you a simple question like, what do you want for a snack? Your brain just short circuits.
You literally can't answer.
You don't have the bandwidth to formulate an answer. If there is an open bag of chips sitting on the kitchen counter, you will eat it. Not because you desperately crave chips, but simply because eating them requires zero cognitive effort. It is the easiest action available.
Exactly.
Knowing this is your archetype removes the shame entirely. You aren't lazy. You are just decision depleted. Your specific fix is to recognize this limitation and take the decision-making process out of the afternoon moment entirely, which leads us perfectly into the most actionable environmental part of this whole philosophy.
Exactly the right transition. Knowing the nuances of your archetype is merely the diagnostic first step. Creating a physical environment that supports your exhausted self is the necessary next step.
Let's talk about the setups.
This brings us to a foundational concept from the guide, friction removal. Behavioral economics teaches us that human beings are profoundly influenced by choice architecture. When our cognitive resources are low, our brains naturally and inevitably follow the path of least resistance.
Right.
If making a refreshing, healthy choice requires finding a recipe, digging through the crisper drawer to find produce, washing it, chopping ingredients, and dirtying 3 different dishes, that is a high-friction environment.
Too much work.
The exhausted brain will reject it. Conversely, if grabbing a sugary energy drink just requires opening a fridge door and twisting a cap, that is a low-friction environment,
Yep.
to change our outcomes, we have to invert that reality.
Make the healthy choice the easy choice.
Exactly. We absolutely cannot rely on willpower on a demanding Tuesday afternoon. We have to deliberately arrange our physical setups so that the healthy, restorative choice is the absolute easiest, most obvious choice available in the room.
This is where the magic really happens for a messy, chaotic, real-world life. I like to call it the Saturday setup.
I love that.
We know for a fact that on a manic Tuesday afternoon, caught between a school pickup, a late conference call, and a pile of laundry, you have exactly 0 mental capacity or time to start chopping fresh ginger root. It is not going to happen.
No.
But if you take just 10 minutes on a relatively quiet Saturday or Sunday morning to alter your physical environment, you completely change your trajectory for the entire upcoming week. It is about building physical setups and rhythms that catch you when you inevitably fall. You're essentially doing a massive favor for your future exhausted self.
A perfect, highly practical example of this setup is creating what the guide terms a sensory sip station. It's a remarkably simple intervention, but incredibly effective in manipulating choice architecture.
Okay, what goes into the station?
You take a small, clear bin or a shallow basket, and you place it on the very front center shelf of your refrigerator, right at eye level. It absolutely must be the first thing your eyes track when you open the door.
Visual cue. Got it.
Inside this dedicated basket, you place all your essentials. Pre-washed lemons, fresh limes, perhaps a pre-peeled knob of ginger, and several bottles of high-quality, cold, sparkling water. By grouping these specific items together in a highly visible designated location, you reduce the cognitive load of deciding what to make, and you reduce the physical friction of gathering ingredients to almost 0. The decision is already made.
I cannot emphasize enough how much this visual cue changes the game. When your brain is foggy, and you blindly open the fridge looking for a quick fix, seeing that beautiful, curated, brightly colored little basket immediately offers a solution that requires 0 thought.
Yeah.
It acts as an invitation to take a pause. Instead of mindlessly opening a can of diet soda, you are actively participating in a tiny 3-minute rhythm that actually serves your biology. It takes a mundane, exhausting afternoon and intentionally inserts a tiny moment of luxury and self-care. It feels elevating.
It really does.
So let's talk about what we are actually mixing up with that sensory sip station when we need a reset.
The guide provides a fascinating and highly specific sensory wake-up toolkit. The underlying physiological principle here is that we can jolt a sluggish, understimulated brain awake using intense, targeted physical sensations rather than relying on chemical stimulants like caffeine.
So no coffee, just sensation.
Right. We are talking about utilizing the shock of intense cold, the tactile sensation of tingling carbonation, sharp acidic aromas, and warming thermogenic spices to send a direct biological wake-up signal through the cranial nerves to the central nervous system. The primary go-to recipe for cutting through mental fog and lack of focus is called the sparkling citrus zest.
This sounds incredible. Tell me exactly how this goes together and why it works so well on a biological level.
The entire process takes less than 2 minutes. You start by filling a tall, clear glass all the way to the top with solid ice. That intense thermal cold is the foundational element. You pour your chilled, sparkling water over the ice, providing the tingling, tactile carbonation that wakes up the mouth. Next, you squeeze in the fresh juice of half a lime. That provides a sharp, highly acidic jolt to your sour taste receptors. But the absolute secret weapon of this recipe is the final step. You take a small, thin piece of lemon peel, hold it directly over the rim of the glass, and give it a sharp, firm twist.
The twist. It sounds exactly like a fancy bartender's trick for a craft cocktail.
It is undeniably a bartender's trick, but we're using it explicitly to manipulate brain chemistry. When you twist that citrus peel, you violently rupture the tiny cell walls on the skin, releasing a microscopic spray of essential oils, specifically a compound called D-limone, across the surface of the drink.
D-limone.
Before you even take your first sip, as you bring the glass to your mouth, you breathe in that bright, sharp citrus aroma. Now, here's the science. The olfactory bulb in your nose is unique. Unlike visual or auditory signals, which have to be routed through the thalamus, the olfactory bulb has a direct, unmediated neural pathway to the limbic system,
Oh,
the area of your brain responsible for emotion, memory, and arousal. It's literal instantaneous aromatherapy.
mm.
The combination of the freezing cold glass in your hand, the popping bubbles, the sour taste on your tongue, and the essential oils hitting your olfactory bulb forces your brain completely out of its low-power standby mode and snaps your nervous system to attention.
I absolutely love the idea of integrating this specific ritual into a busy workday. Imagine the profound difference in how you feel and how you view yourself. Instead of dragging yourself to the sad office coffee pot for a burnt, stale cup of sludge that is just going to make you anxious and dehydrated, you step away for 2 intentional minutes.
Right.
You hear the ice clinking in the glass, you smell the bright, clean citrus, you are treating yourself to a beautiful, refreshing, highly engaging sensory experience. It shifts your entire internal narrative from I am struggling and failing to survive this afternoon to I am actively nourishing, respecting, and refreshing myself.
No.
It is a massive, elegant upgrade to your daily flow. But I do have a question. What about the days when the fatigue isn't just mental fog? What if it's a dreary, rainy day and your body physically feels cold and made of lead?
That's a very different manifestation of fatigue, often tied to poor circulation or low core temperature, and it requires a distinctly different tool. For that deep physical sluggishness when you feel like your limbs are heavy and you're moving through molasses, the guide recommends a recipe called the spicy ginger jolt.
Okay, ginger.
When your body feels heavy and stagnant, a cold, bright citrus drink might actually be too jarring or insufficient. You need to create an internal spark. Ginger contains active compounds called gingerols. These are natural thermogenics.
Thermogenics, meaning heat producing.
Yes. When they interact with specific receptors in your mouth and throat called TRPV1 receptors, they create a gentle, warming sensation that dilates blood vessels, helping to kickstart cardiovascular circulation and slightly raise your metabolic rate.
So how do we set this one up to be low friction?
Again, the setup must remain simple. You add about a teaspoon of freshly grated ginger to the bottom of your glass. If the act of grating ginger feels like too much friction for your exhausted Tuesday self, keeping a high-quality pre-made ginger paste or a ginger syrup in your fridge basket works beautifully.
Brilliant.
You squeeze in the juice of half a lemon, which perfectly complements the earthy spice. Then you top it with ice and your sparkling water. When you take a sip, the cold carbonation delivers that spicy, warming heat right to the back of your throat.
That sounds amazing.
It creates a fascinating internal contrast. A warm fire delivered in a cold medium that physically shakes your system out of that heavy, stagnant state. It gets your blood flowing in a way that feels incredibly vibrant, grounding, and natural, with absolutely zero risk of a caffeine crash later in the evening.
That sounds absolutely incredible for those dreary, low-energy afternoons when you just want to curl up in a ball under a blanket. And I know the guide's appendix has a few other quick hits for different specific types of fatigue. I want to briefly touch on them because they really show how versatile and customized this sensory approach can be.
Oh, absolutely.
There is the salty grapefruit zinger. It uses the harsh, shocking contrast of a pinch of sea salt and sour grapefruit juice to replace trace electrolytes and literally flip the alert switch in your brain. It is jarring in the best, most clarifying possible way.
Yeah, that one wakes you right up.
And then there's the peppermint eye opener, which uses a single drop of food-grade peppermint oil in ice-cold water. The menthol in the peppermint activates cold receptors, creating this intense, cooling tingle that acts like an internal ice bath for your senses, which is absolutely perfect if you have terrible screen fatigue and your eyes are burning from staring at tiny fonts on spreadsheets all day.
The variety in the toolkit is key because it empowers you to listen and respond to what your specific biology is asking for on any given day.
Wow.
And as you begin to actively replace the willpower trap and the sugar roller coaster with these simple sensory setups, you start to undergo a profound, lasting shift. The guide dedicates its final section to recognizing and cementing this transformation, a concept it eloquently calls observable improvement.
This concept is so important to discuss because as women constantly striving for improvement, we very often completely miss our own progress.
We absolutely do. Culturally, we are conditioned to look for massive, cinematic firework moments of transformation. We expect to wake up one day feeling like a completely different person, a superhero with boundless energy.
Right.
But true biological balancing and nervous system regulation doesn't look like a fireworks show. The biggest, most profound sign of success isn't necessarily a new, dramatic, overwhelming feeling of energy. It is actually what you don't feel anymore.
What you don't.
It is the negative space. It is the sudden absence of the struggle. Observable improvement is looking at the clock, realizing it is 4:15 p.m., and suddenly noticing that you completely missed the afternoon slump. The heavy eye wall simply never arrived.
Oh.
The internal panic voice demanding sugar was entirely silent. Your energy just remained a steady, quiet, unremarkable hum throughout the day. That silence in your brain, that beautiful absence of physiological chaos, is the ultimate undeniable proof that your new rhythms and your setups are working perfectly.
I think this is where so many of us stumble in our daily lives. We'll have a great week, our energy is wonderfully stable, we aren't crashing. But precisely because it feels calm and uneventful, we don't celebrate it.
Exactly.
And if we don't actively celebrate it, the new behavior doesn't become integrated into our sense of self.
Yeah.
In the reality of a busy, demanding life, if you don't intentionally pause to acknowledge a victory, the sheer momentum and chaos of the next day will just sweep it away. That is why taking just a few minutes to actively acknowledge your progress is so crucial. Let's call it the 5-minute win list.
How does that specific practice look when applied to a busy week?
It is about deliberately documenting the silent victories to rewire your brain. At the end of the week, maybe on a Friday afternoon, you literally write down the things that didn't happen. You note, I walked past the break room pastries on Wednesday afternoon, and I honestly didn't care. I didn't even have to fight the urge.
Right.
Or I woke up on Thursday morning actually feeling rested before my alarm went off, instead of dragging myself out of bed. Or I handled a highly stressful, conflict-heavy email at 3:30 p.m. without feeling like I was going to burst into tears from sheer exhaustion.
I love that.
Acknowledging these quiet, unremarkable wins cements your new identity. Through neuroplasticity, you stop being the woman who is always exhausted and helplessly addicted to sugar, and you genuinely become the woman who knows exactly how to fuel her body, honor her rhythms, and maintain her peace. Once that identity takes deep root, these physical setups are no longer a chore or a new habit you are forcing. They are just a forever reality. They are just who you are.
That fundamental shift in identity is everything. It changes your entire relationship with your own physical form. And it leads me to a final provocative thought that builds beautifully on everything we have discussed today. For so much of our modern lives, we have been culturally conditioned to view our bodies as machines.
Very true.
We think of them as mechanical engines that need to be constantly pushed, rigidly managed, and forced into high gear, regardless of the internal conditions or the external stressors. But what if we completely abandoned that industrial metaphor? What if we started treating our bodies and our minds like complex living gardens?
Oh, that's beautiful.
A garden doesn't need to be forced or yelled at to grow. It simply needs the gardener to pay close attention, to provide the right kind of water when it is dry, to ensure it has the right light, to respect the changing seasons, and to gently remove the weeds that choke its natural flow. When we stop trying to hack or force our way through the afternoon and start gently tending to our biological rhythms, energy ceases to be a constant, exhausting battle and becomes a natural, effortless, elegant state of being.
If you want to dive deeper into these ideas, the full guide is available on Amazon. You can find the link in our bio. It's a perfect deep dive for a quiet afternoon. Thanks for listening to FM Talks.